You think it's your thoughts, the negativity, the loop, the stories you keep telling yourself. So you try to change them. You journal, you meditate, you repeat mantras like spells, but still, the weight stays. The friction lingers, and deep inside, something doesn't shift. Because here's the truth, no one tells you. Your frequency is not shaped by your thoughts. It's shaped by your trauma. Not the trauma you remember, but the one you survived by forgetting. The fear your body swallowed. The silence that froze inside you. The shame that rewired your nervous system long before you had words for it. And those wounds, they hum beneath your smile. They broadcast beneath your affirmations. They are the frequency. That's why changing your thoughts doesn't work. Because your signal isn't coming from your mind. It's coming from your scars. Your body remembers what your mind learned to deny. That moment when your voice was ignored. That glance that made you shrink. That threat you never saw coming, but still brace for, years later. It didn't just hurt, it rewired you. Because trauma isn't just what happened, it's what your body did to survive what happened. It changed your breath, your posture, your resting tone, and those shifts became your signal, broadcasting into every room long before you say a word. You don't need to think negatively to attract chaos. You just need to carry a frequency that says, I'm still in danger. And the universe doesn't speak English. It speaks vibration. So when your system is locked in survival, you don't attract what you want. You attract what matches your wounds. That's not bad energy. That's unprocessed memory. And no amount of mindset work can override a body still stuck in the past. You've spent years trying to think your way out of sadness, out of fear, out of low vibes. But healing doesn't start with thinking differently. It starts with feeling what you never got to feel. Because trauma freezes time, not in your mind, but in your body. That flinch when someone raises their voice. That shallow breath when you enter a crowded room. That tightness in your chest when you try to speak your truth. You didn't choose those reactions. They chose you when safety was no longer guaranteed. And those reflexes don't go away just because you understand them. They go away when they're felt, when they're allowed to rise, when they're met with presence instead of pressure. This isn't about positive vibes. This is about honest frequency. And sometimes, honesty sounds like trembling, like tears, like shaking hands and racing hearts. That's not failure. That's the body finally saying, I'm ready to release what I held for too long. You were never broken. Your system just adapted. It tuned itself to survive a world that didn't feel safe. And in that adaptation, you lost access to your true frequency. You didn't lose your power. You buried it. Beneath coping, beneath pleasing, beneath pretending you were okay. And so much of spiritual advice misses this completely. They tell you to raise your vibration, to align your thoughts, to visualize better outcomes. But what if your nervous system is still locked in defense? What if the vibration you're trying to reach feels dangerous to your body, because peace, to someone who's only known chaos, can feel like a threat. Joy, to someone raised on tension, can feel unsafe. And openness, to someone who learned to armor up, can feel like exposure. That's why your affirmations don't stick. That's why the new frequency keeps collapsing. You're not failing, you're overriding. And healing doesn't happen by overriding. It happens by listening, by softening, by letting your body remember what safety feels like before you ever try to ascend. The mind doesn't lead healing, it follows it. But we've built a culture that worships the intellect, that tries to hack, reframe, optimize everything, even emotions. We say, just reprogram your thoughts, shift your perspective, choose a better story. But healing isn't a story, it's a signal. And your nervous system will reject every story that doesn't feel safe. That's why change doesn't stick when it's forced. Because your body hears a lie even if your mouth says the right thing. You can say, I am worthy. But if your breath is shallow, if your stomach's tight, if your heart rate spikes, your frequency says otherwise. And the universe doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you are. So instead of trying to control your thoughts, try this. Breathe deeper. Touch your chest. Let your shoulders drop. Speak slower. Feel the floor beneath your feet. Bring your system back to now. Again and again and again. Because it's in that grounded presence that new thoughts arise naturally. Not from fear, not from force, but from a frequency that finally feels safe enough to expand. Frequency isn't something you fake, it's something you return to. And you don't return to it by fixing yourself. You return by noticing how your breath holds when you speak your truth, how your jaw tenses in moments of silence, how your chest closes when love gets too close. These aren't flaws, they're footprints, evidence of the path you've walked and the body that's carried you through it all. And every time you soften into those places, every time you breathe into what's tight, stay with what's raw, welcome what's shaking, you begin to shift your frequency, not because you raised your vibration, but because you stopped lying to it. You made space for the version of you that doesn't need to protect anymore. That's where transformation happens, not in the affirmations, not in the positive thinking, but in the honesty of the moment, when nothing is being hidden, nothing is being denied, and your system whispers, now we're safe. When the noise fades, you begin to see clearly, not because the world changed, but because your frequency did. The same people, the same patterns, the same choices. But now, you're not reacting. You're witnessing. You're choosing. This is the moment most awakening videos don't talk about. Not the bliss, not the cosmic downloads, but the grounded awareness that rises when your system is no longer screaming. It's quiet, almost ordinary, but it changes everything. Because now you don't chase high vibes. You honor real ones. You stop filtering your truth to match someone else's version of healed. You stop performing joy and start embodying calm. And that calm isn't passive, it's magnetic. It's what draws new people, new opportunities, new timelines. Not because you asked for them, but because your frequency finally made room for them. When your frequency shifts, you stop living for protection and start living from presence. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to be high vibe all the time. You no longer collapse when things go wrong, because the trauma no longer runs the broadcast. The fear no longer drives the signal. And what's left isn't perfection, it's permission. Permission to feel, to fail, to rest, to take up space without apology. You don't need to heal everything to be whole. You just need to stop pretending you're broken. That's when your nervous system softens. That's when your energy settles. And that's when people start saying, something about you feels different. But it's not something you say. It's not something you post. It's not even something you try to share. It's what you emit when you're no longer performing healing. You're embodying truth. And truth always resonates at a frequency you don't have to force. There's a moment when you realize you don't have to fight anymore. Not your past, not your thoughts, not your feelings. Because you're not trying to override the signal, you're aligned with it. And when that happens, life doesn't suddenly become perfect, but it becomes real. You stop asking, how do I attract better things? And start asking, who am I becoming when I'm no longer afraid to be myself? And in that becoming, your frequency speaks louder than your voice ever could. It tells the world, I'm not pretending anymore. I'm not escaping anymore. I'm not negotiating my safety for your comfort. This is me, alive, in tune, whole. And it's not about being healed. It's about being here, fully. No masks, no edits, no filters. Just the quiet power of someone who finally trusts their own energy. Because when the signal is clear, the world listens. You didn't need to raise your vibration. You needed to come back to it, because it was never gone, just buried. Buried beneath survival patterns, buried beneath noise, buried beneath the belief that your thoughts were the enemy. But now, you know better. Now, you understand that trauma isn't a curse. It's an imprint, a frequency the body held when it couldn't speak. And healing isn't erasing that frequency, it's integrating it, so that the version of you who froze, who flinched, who fragmented, finally gets to come home. And from that home, a new signal rises. Not perfect, not polished, but honest, unshakable, undeniable. A frequency that doesn't ask for attention, but draws it. Because nothing resonates louder than someone who's no longer running from the sound of their own truth.